We are 2 weeks away from NFL free agency, and the Miami Dolphins may have just received a gift from the Los Angeles Chargers and Cincinnati Bengals ahead of NFL free agency. And you might be asking, how could the Dolphins be getting a gift from two other NFL teams? Well, it's actually in the form of potential cuts that could go down, because it seems like that there are going to be two free agents available for Miami to sign that they did not think they were going to be available that could benefit this roster. And these two are the players I'm talking about. Joey Bosa, the talented edge rusher for the Los Angeles Chargers, and then Sheldon Rankins, the defensive tackle who spent a lot of times in New Orleans, was last year with Cincinnati, was also with the Texans and Jets prior to the Bengals. These two could actually become new free agent targets for the Miami Dolphins in free agency because, well, Sports Illustrated made the note originally from Dan Graziano of ESPN that the Chargers may ultimately release the Pro Bowler. It's actually expected because of his $12.3 million roster bonus that comes in next month. So Joey Bosa, not thought of someone who could be available, might be on the free agency market, but you also have the same things in the former of the defensive lineman Sheldon Rankins. Now, this one's actually official. Bosa is expected to happen. Rankins has already been released, as noted by Adam Schefter in a couple days ago. And the reason why this is so important, because these two could be targets for the Dolphins in free agency on cheap contracts that could help fill out their depth chart, especially on that defensive line. Before we get into talking about these two potential targets, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Dolphins Today. IG is the handle. We put out daily content over there in between our YouTube videos. If you want 365-day coverage on the Miami Dolphins, well, make sure you follow us on Instagram, post short-form content to supplement our YouTube videos and live shows. So join the channel and Instagram page today. All right, the first player we'll talk about out of these two is Joey Bosa. This one's very interesting to me because I actually think he's less of a target for the Dolphins than Sheldon Rankins. I think Rankins is much more realistic. But when you think of what Miami has at linebacker and edge, we know that the edge department is interesting because they have four guys, but the question is, will all four be on the roster as we progress throughout the offseason? Chop is going to be here, no doubt about it. Mo Kamara as well. But Jalen Phillips entering his final year of his rookie contract, that fifth-year option. Dolphins have to make a decision on what they're going to do with him. But Bradley Chubb is the one that I'm going to focus on here because the Dolphins could create $19.5 million in cap space if they release Bradley Chubb post-June 1st. Now, they could do it now and designate it for post-June 1st so they have that money to spend in free agency right now. And my question is, if they ultimately want to move on from Bradley Chubb, could they save that $19.5 million in cap space by designating a post-June 1st release, and then go after Joey Bosa, who's a very similar player to Chubb in terms of talent level and production, but also faces the same issues and question marks as both of them get up there in age and have dealt with injuries over the past 2 or 3 seasons. It's fascinating, but Bosa could be a much cheaper target for the Miami Dolphins in free agency to have on this roster. Bosa, coming out of Ohio State, was just an unbelievable player. He won Rookie Defensive Player of the Year. This guy was a perennial Defensive Player of the Year candidate when he was in his first 4 seasons. You see his numbers. He missed a lot of his second year in that 2018 season, but coming out in 2016, 2017, and then he had that unfortunate injury in 2018 and bounced back and was great in 2019. This is one of the better edge rushers in football when he is fully healthy. The problem with Joey Bosa is that he just misses a ton of games. He is one of the most injury-prone defensive linemen and edge rushers out there, whether it's back injuries, leg injuries. No matter what it is, he's just missed a lot. He's missed about half of the games over the last 3 seasons. That's just simply unacceptable, and you cannot rely on him being one of your top 2 edge rushers on your team. Now, in Miami's case, if they ultimately moved on from Chubb and brought in Bosa on a cheap contract in free agency, he would be their third guy behind Phillips and Chop Robinson, which is what makes him an intriguing target for Miami. But the question is, are you feeling comfortable with relying on him? Because as I mentioned with the history and injury history, over the last 4 seasons, you see the numbers on screen, man. When he's on the field, he's playing well. But the issue, 5 games, 9 games, 14 games, he just simply is not able to stay on the football field, which is a major concern, especially for a team in the Miami Dolphins that has dealt with so many injuries in the past. How many times do you want to revisit players that are injury prone and might not be available late in the season when you need them to be? That's a serious concern and question. But let me know your thoughts before I give you my official take on the matter. Should the Dolphins target Joey Bosa in free agency if he ultimately does get released? Type Y for yes, type N for no. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. If Joey Bosa gets released, I'm sure the Dolphins might check in with Bosa, but I don't think it's a good idea to sign the former Rookie of the Year on the defensive side of the ball. He's missed 46% of the games in the past 3 seasons, and despite him being really good when on the football field, I don't know if it's going to benefit Miami, who has had injury issues on their defensive front in the past. Sure, it could save you money if you release Bradley Chubb post-June 1st and then bring in Bosa, but at that point, why wouldn't you just restructure Bradley Chubb? He already knows the system. He's been in your building. You know what to expect from Bradley, and he has had less nagging injuries, but he is returning from a serious injury. I think the Dolphins should ultimately stick with Bradley Chubb if they're choosing between Bosa and Chubb. That's my official thoughts on the matter, but I'll tell you what, folks, if the Dolphins make a move in NFL free agency, well, we'll have you covered. All news and rumors are broken down here on the channel. We're 25 subscribers away from 67,500. Help us out. Let's get there today because I want to get to 68K subscribers as soon as possible. Like I said, if anything happens, we'll break it down. All right, let's move over to the other defensive line free agent target, Sheldon Rankins. Is he someone that Miami could go after? Well, the Dolphins are going to have to add a lot to this defensive line because, well, they simply just only have one guy on the roster right now. That is Zach Sieler. Now, Sieler is one of your top guys in terms of your just overall roster, but you need to add a starter beside him. You need to add depth behind him and whoever that other starter is. Like, this defensive line will be one of the top kind of positions that gets a ton of attention in the draft, in free agency, and maybe Rankins can be that guy after getting released by the Bengals. Now, he is an intriguing player because he's had a lot of notoriety and success in the NFL before, originally with the New Orleans Saints, which is where he started his career, but he had a pretty good 3-season stretch with the Jets and Texans before having a tough season in 2024 with Cincinnati, only starting 7 games, not really producing much for the Bengals, but we have seen him be a productive player in the past. The question is that days behind him? That will be the question we have to ask ourselves. Before we talk more about Rankins as a player, I want to make sure you're hooked up with the #1 Dolphins gear out there. Represent Miami in the summer, in the offseason, during the season. It does not matter. Grab your Dolphins gear today. And this shirt right now, $5 off when you go to chatsports.com/DolphinsGray shirt. Get your shirt today. Represent Miami the best way possible. That link will be in the description and comments of today's video. When you talk about the player that Sheldon Rankins is, he is more of a pass-rushing defensive lineman than a run-stopping defensive tackle. And Zach Sieler is a do-it-all, but I think he's better as a pass rusher than a run-stopper, even though he is good at both. But there are a distinct difference between how productive Rankins is in terms of stopping the run to stopping the pass. When you look at his last 4 seasons, and yeah, this is the older version of him, but the pass rush grades from PFF are significantly higher than the rush defense grades. It's pretty significant, actually. There's only 1 year where they're even close in the same stratosphere, and that was in 2022 when he had 3 sacks, 7 QB hits for the New York Jets. But you see the stark difference. It's almost cut in half in terms of his rush defense grade to his pass rush grade over the last 4 seasons every single year. So yes, you would have him as a nice little pass rushing guy from the interior, but when you talk about what Miami probably needs more from their interior defensive line, it's likely run stopping, because assuming you're going to stay healthy on the edge, you have Chop Robinson, you have Jalen Phillips, you have Zach Sieler getting after the quarterback on the inside. The question is, can you stop the run and be a more physical football team in these cold conditions and not get run over by a James Cook, not get run over by a Joe Mixon, a Josh Jacobs like you saw last season? You need a run-stopping defensive tackle to help kind of complement Zach Sieler, in my opinion. But let me know your thoughts. Would you sign Sheldon Rankins? We asked that with Joey Bosa earlier. Would you do a sign of Sheldon Rankins as someone at the tail end of their career, would be a nice veteran to add to this group? Would you sign him? Type S for sign or type P for pass. I would sign Sheldon Rankins in NFL free agency. He's been around the block, and even though he is a better pass rusher than a run stopper, I think this would be an excellent addition to your depth of that defensive line on the interior. He is not going to be someone you sign to be your second D lineman in complementary services of Zach Sealer. This is a depth piece, your third, fourth defensive lineman, and you had Deshaun Hand and Benito Jones fill that role last year. I thought they were fine, but Rankins would give you a little bit of a better service on that end. Yeah, I'd be fine bringing Hand and Jones back in free agency, but assuming Rankins would come relatively cheap, I think he would be a great addition potentially for the Miami Dolphins depth chart if Chris Grier was able to sign him for the cheap to be that third defensive lineman, and then you draft one or sign Calais Campbell back to be that DT2 to Zach Sealer once again. But whenever you think about this entire offseason, it's really going to come down to Chris Grier making right decisions, because the Dolphins, as we currently sit, only have about $1.5 million in cap space. They are cap compliant right now, but have an effective cap space when you factor in the draft class of negative 6.5. So they still have to create a lot of cap space to sign some marquee free agents and veteran free agents in free agency that starts in 2 weeks. Chris Grier is going to have to make some things happen in terms of creating roster space and cap space, but he's also going to have to hit, because they have to get a lot of new starters. They have to get 2 new starters at safety. They need to get 2 offensive guards, defensive linemen, boundary corner, linebacker 2, a real backup quarterback. It's going to be tough for Chris Grier to handle all of these responsibilities, and this is the most important offseason that he is going to face. He's under the most amount of pressure to have a bounce-back season, but he also doesn't have a lot to work with, so Grier is going to have to find big-time fits for this Dolphins offensive scheme, defensive scheme, for cheap on the veteran market. I think Rankins could be a good option for Miami. And like I mentioned, if any move happens with the Dolphins, we will have you covered with a video. So hit that sub button. Help us get to 68K subscribers. The goal is to get there before free agency. We got 2 weeks to get 500 subs. I think we can do it. Join the channel today for breaking Dolphins news and rumors.